Welcome to the Podcast Superfriends. 5 podcast producers from across North America get together to discuss podcasting.
Hello, everyone. Spring has sprung. There are flowers bursting forth. If you're in an area where there is pollen hanging in the air, you don't need me to tell you that it is springtime. And spring is a time that traditionally a lot of people think about doing a big clean, a spring clean, if you will. And if you are a podcaster, we, the Podcast Superfriends, have some ideas about a podcast spring cleaning that you can do. Let's meet all the Superfriends right now. As I'll start with myself, I'm Catherine O'Brien. I'm a podcast producer in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Let's take it to Texas. Johnny.
Where in Texas? Hello, I'm Johnny. I'm a podcast producer in Fort Worth, Texas, west of Dallas. We don't rep Dallas over here.
Up
Deep
north?
in the heart of Texas, I thought was the answer. Matt Kundle, Winnipeg, Manitoba, the Sound Off Podcast Network.
Let's go to Jag. Where are you?
Detroit, Michigan. Hello. John Gay, JAG In Detroit Podcasts, Detroit, Michigan.
And coming in from Boston.
David Yaz in Boston, pod617.com, the Boston Podcast Network. In Pod We Trust.
Very good. It's so nice to see all the Podcast Super Friends. And this is going to be, I think, really a fun episode because we're going to be talking a spring clean. We're going to share some from our podcast wisdom, some things we are getting rid of. They are out. These are podcast things that are getting the big spring clean. And then we're going to come in just as a spring breeze does with some refreshing new things that we think that podcasters should try and think about, maybe put into their workflows, some things that they should implement in this big spring clean. And then if we have time, we're going to pivot because, of course, spring gives way to summer. And there is a lot of thoughts, feelings, emotions, and experiences that podcasters have when it comes to summer. So that is what is in store for you to hear on this edition of the Podcast Super Friends. So I want to start it off because this has been a hot topic that everybody has been talking about. It's been pushed to us so much as we kick things off to talk about what we as podcast producers are getting rid of in our spring cleaning. I want to first go to Johnny. Johnny, you've got some pretty big news for us. What are you getting rid of in your podcasting spring clean?
So my podcasting spring clean was kind of chosen for me. I didn't choose it, but then I slowly came around to it afterwards. So I had 2 of my clients come to me and say, stop the shorts, stop ordering them. We're not doing them anymore. They're not working. And I mean, you guys know from before, like the last 6 months, I've been like, you got to do shorts. You got to do shorts. They got to have memes. They got to be funny. They got to be fast paced. And they got to be great. And everybody should be doing them. I have completely 180'd on that. And it wasn't, it wasn't a total 180 really quick. It was a slow kind of burn. Once I started realizing what the clients were talking about and why they wanted to stop doing the shorts, I had time to kind of refine the thesis around it. And the reason is not for everybody. This is specific to the type of clients that I work with, which is primarily business focuses. So they're talking to CEOs, vice presidents, senior executives, entrepreneurs, people like that. And what I've seen anecdotally is shorts really works for the really popular podcasts, the Barstools, the Joe Rogans, the comedian podcasts, and they don't work super well for these kind of businessy topics. Like the topics that these people are talking about, it's really hard to get a coherent message of some part of the podcast in just 60 seconds. And to be totally honest, the way that they come out, like it's just kind of, it's cringe for lack of a better term. They look bad. They feel uncomfortable. They don't turn into anything. And we're paying a lot of money for these shorts. So my spring cleaning out shorts. And what I would encourage people listening, if you have a podcast and you're considering doing shorts or you are already doing shorts, you need to hold yourself to a really high standard for these shorts. So maybe if you're doing like 5 shorts per episode, maybe you cut it down to 1 short per episode. It's going to save you money. It's going to save you time. It's going to save you the back and forth with the shorts editor. But your expectations and your criteria for these shorts have to be the absolute highest. These have to be able to compete with everything that you're seeing going viral on TikTok, on Reels, on YouTube Shorts. These have to be tip top. And if it means 3 or 4 rounds of editing back and forth with the shorts person, whoever you're working with, take that extra time. But before you even get to that point, you need to have a serious look in the mirror and go, is shorts right for my content? Does my content have genuine shorts translatability, if that's even a word? And figure out if your content does work for it. Try it out. If it doesn't, you can scrap it. But my spring cleaning out is the shorts.
First time
Don't
ever
even
in
wear shorts.
spring- shorts, yeah.
Who doesn't wear shorts in spring?
Johnny is pants only.
I'm not even wearing pants.
Yeah, you might see him from the waist up if you're only
Buzzing.
listening to the video. Yeah.
Well, I think this is I'm glad, especially as you said, because you really were an advocate for shorts. I personally am not convinced yet about the word transferability that you mentioned. I don't know that shorts or the short form content really leads to actual engaged new listeners. I know a lot of people are pushing it, but I don't know that they've really been able to prove that. I know that when I am on a platform where there is some sort of short content, I am not jumping to long form content based on that. I know, Jag, you have a counterpoint to that, loving counterpoint.
I do. This came up in our offline call between the five of us last week when Johnny came in and surprised all of us with this idea that he wasn't going to do shorts for a while, or again, actually. This is where we kind of form that line of differentiation between different formatted shows. Julian Edelman, former Patriot, has a podcast called Games with Names. The Kelsey brothers, as most of our listeners and viewers will know, have a podcast called New Heights. I started becoming a regular listener of both of those long-form podcasts by seeing their shorts repeatedly in my Facebook feed. I use Facebook because I'm old, but I see over and over again, the shorts are funny. They were entertaining. I enjoyed the subject matter. I'm a big NFL guy. So I started listening to both of those podcasts because of the exposure that I got on shorts. Am I representative of everybody? Maybe, maybe not. But I think there is a place for well-produced shorts for certain styles of content.
That makes a lot of sense. And you because also I know we're dealing with anecdotes that you actually became a listener of some of these podcasts. But yeah, I think that what I think I get a little suspicious about is my favorite thing to say is I don't know that the podcast industry per se always knows what moves the needle to grow audiences, to get new committed listeners. And so that we're always a little bit tempted to think the new shiny thing is the thing that's going to do it. And I'm with the shorts, I'm not so sure, but you actually became a listener engaged there.
Johnny, I want to back up Johnny here. I agree with this move that he's doing because he's got business.
Again,
podcasts.
I'm not doing it. These are my clients coming to me, the ones who actually have the podcast.
Well, if you believe in it, you'll push back on them and have a fight with them.
Yeah.
You would advocate for it if you wanted to.
But it is. I mean, in 37 seconds, what business, anything can you get across to anyone that is going to really lead to anything? It would just be a surface level conversation. But when we watch, New Heights, where I like to watch Aaron Andrews and Carissa Thompson on their podcast, I can, in 37 seconds, that's a whole bit. That's a piece of comedy. That's a piece of content. But in the business world, you're better off going 2 and 3 minutes deep on whatever it is you need to say. So maybe shorts is not the thing in some business cases. Maybe we want to go longer with that.
And David, wearing shorts in or out? What are your thoughts?
I offer friendly rebuttals on a lot of these points. For one, if we can't find a compelling 60-second clip from a podcast, then maybe the podcast isn't that interesting. Now, I mean, I get the point that business podcasts have more complex ideas, takes more time to flesh out the ideas, but we're not trying to get the entire lump of information to people. It's a teaser. And as part of what we do, we have to be able to develop good teasers. So I'm still a believer in it. I do see that spending a ton of time on them and like doing 5 per episode could be overkill. But we'll get into this a little bit more. It's becoming easier to make them. I use the Descript app, and I've only been doing shorts on them for a couple months, and I'm not great at it yet. But there are tools there that make it very easy. You can use AI to even identify an interesting part. You can agree with the robot or not, whether that's good. But so I think still used in the right way, a short can be a good entree.
And maybe there's a happy medium of where, because before what I would really harp on is like, it's got to have like images floating up, and it's got to have the text, and it's got to have pictures overlay and all this stuff to keep the person's eyes attached to the screen before scrolling. And maybe there's the happy medium of, because it's so much easier to make shorts. You're right. There is still those 60-second great teaser clips, because we're doing them at the beginning of the podcast. Those are less than 60 seconds. That could easily be a short, but maybe it doesn't have to be this really overproduced something that we're spending so much of our brain power on that's still not generating the return we want. Maybe we take our overhead on what we're spending on it from 10 to 1. Of where it's literally just the clip, maybe some captions over the top of it, and we're really only going for the person that's going to really sit there and watch it and then take the next step to find it, versus the person that just doesn't see the flashing lights or whatever flashing on the screen and immediately scrolls away. Because that's what we're seeing, is like we're spending so much time working with these people to get all of the things to look just right, and it's just not converting into anything.
Yeah, and I'd agree with you in that, especially because a lot of these business podcasts, I do produce a podcast, the subject is higher education, and the host, she talks about a lot of heavy issues, discrimination, harassment on campus, protests, things like that. I'm not going to do a short with a lot of little flying birds and thumbs up and 100% and all that. So for that, I think, yeah, you just go with it. Make it look as serious as the topic is. Remove the stickers, just go with captions and have the person saying something powerful. And then maybe that's a good entree for someone to say, oh, yeah, I'll listen to what Professor so-and-so had to say on this podcast.
But for Johnny's clients, I'm specifying, for Johnny's clients, shorts, spring clean, they are out of here. Right. Let's go to the north. Matt, tell us, what are you getting rid of in your podcasting spring cleaning?
Dead podcasts that have pod faded. So over the years, I've managed to collect a whole bunch of them, and they just sit there, and they're inactive, and they're cluttering my mind. They're cluttering the screen. I've got to scroll down to get through stuff. So we're going to move them along, and that's it. We're just going to make the network look a little bit tidier. So because it sits there, and there's a number of podcasts that just stopped production probably about 2 years after the pandemic had ended. They'd had their 3-year run. There are a lot of people who had some life changes. A lot of people just stop making episodes. Things get in the way. But it's clutter. It's clutter for me. It's clutter on the network. It's just clutter. So, and I know what I'm thinking, maybe, a few people are downloading it. We can run promos through it. It's still an active podcast. But visually and in my head, it's a mess. So I'm going to move them along.
And when you say move them along, yeah, go ahead, David. Yeah.
I'll just answer the question. When you move it along, you send, you do what you do with any podcast that's pod faded, and you send it to Podcasting Cemetery, which is Anchor.
Now Spotify for podcasters.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
No, I was just going to say, is it worth some of those, if the host wants to revive the show? I mean, I wonder if there's, it has happened, but I mean, there are a lot of pod fades in my world as well, but occasionally someone will fade for a number of months and then revive and say, you know what, this time I'm going to stick to a plan. Does that happen, Matt? Or?
I think after 2 years, that's
a long
time. It's definitely worth an email. Like, I always send an email to say, what do you want me to do with this? And anything that does go beyond, 2 years, I'm just saying, I think you need a new home at Anchor.
That just happened to me last week, Matt. I was checking my credit card statement, and I was getting billed by Libsyn for $20, $7, $5 every single month after month after month. And after a long back and forth with their support team, I finally was able to figure out what these shows actually were. These guys hadn't put out episodes in a couple years. And so I just closed the show, emailed them and said, hey, here's your login to Libsyn. I've closed your show, so I would stop getting billed for it. I'm not going to back off. I'm not going to charge you for any back pay over hosting it, because that's on me. If you want to keep your show alive, you can log in and put in your credit card information and do the $5 a month thing, or go over to Anchor. That's, I'm not going to spend the time shifting it all over myself. You guys can handle that. It's not possible.
I've been dealing with a lot of I still have to deal with the 301 redirects, but it is a bit of a pain in the ass to try to get these things out of here because you need cooperation from people. You need them to buy in and say, okay, this is where you're putting my podcast. And then you need to, sort of walk them through the destination on where to go with it. But
I didn't want to deal with that. I was like, you can do $5 a month. It's fine. Like it will save you such a headache, and your podcast gets to stay online. And also, this is an advocacy for keeping your podcast on YouTube. YouTube is totally free. You don't have to pay to have your podcast on YouTube. So you can close it out on, if you're paying for Libsyn or Simplecast or Megaphone or whatever, and leave the podcast up on YouTube, and it will still be there forever. And you can always go back and download those things and re-upload them to an audio format if you decide to, reopen the show.
Cool.
Johnny's situation of finding out where are these $5, $7, $9, $20 all coming from? Those are from the days when we would set up the hosting on our own dime, thinking, "Oh, this will be
I'll
no
just bill you
problem
once
with
a year because you're going to do this forever."
No problem. And yes, I think if not, all of us have learned that lesson that can come and bite your wallet there. All right, let's continue with our spring cleaning. David in Boston, how are spring cleaning for your podcast going over there?
Well, my suggestion as far as spring cleaning goes is kind of simple, and they are long, boring interviews. So I think it's always good to take a fresh look at your approach or someone you're working with, their approach, and really, try to coach them up. I think a lot of us, whether we're hosts or we're podcast producers, we get a show up and running and it's good. And then along the way, maybe we don't be self-critical enough to look at most of these podcasts are interview podcasts. So to me, the biggest cardinal sin that hosts make is not listening to their guests. And they come in with a bunch of questions, and I can watch some of these hosts in the middle of the podcast and they're looking down at their notes, and I know that's a problem because they're thinking about the next question they're going to ask instead of listening to their guests. So to really kind of pump up the color, and the magic of podcasting is to enhance that conversation. If you're listening to what the person is saying, you're going to build up, you're going to ask them follow-up questions. Tell us more about that. Oh, I didn't realize, you had a sister who was a best-selling author. Who is she? You just mentioned that under your breath, but I'm going to ask you about it now because this is a conversation, and that's what I would do. So I think sometimes we fall into habits where we check the box. We get a great guest on. They're going to come on. They're going to tell a story. They're going to answer these 10 questions. Throw out that playbook and try to fly by the seat of your pants a lot more, because it'll be freeing to you and it'll make for better conversation and a better show.
David, could part of that too be you taking the initiative as well as the producer and the editor saying like, hey, this is something that I'm going to step up and say, I think we need to be much more critical with how we edit this. I think there's 10 minutes in probably every episode that we can get rid of that's totally boring. And you bring this up all the time. It's so how's the weather where you're from? Like all that crap can go out the window and we can just get right into the meat of the episode. So it could be a combination of the two. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, absolutely. As producers, we don't want the burden to fall fully on us. We want the host to improve as well. But I'm with you. And I worry sometimes about the shows that when you get a show that even has a following, at least you've got maybe a couple hundred followers, and you do think, oh, well, they like us now. So they're going to want to hear about how I spilled coffee in my car today, and which has nothing to do with the episode. But at least to I think a little of that is all right. But you're right, Johnny. I think a lot of times, we can, once the episode is over, you usually know, hey, that part that when we talked for, 12 minutes about, how you had to wait an extra hour for your latte this morning, maybe we take that out. So I'm with you.
Yeah, and I think it's putting that bug in the host's ear, just having the conversation of like, hey, let's be pretty, have the host you as the host need to be more mindful of even thinking about those things, because I think a lot of podcasters can go into what we call autopilot mode, where they're doing their show for so long that they get to the point where it's like, I'm talking to this person for an hour or 90 minutes and I don't even really think about it once it's done. Having that constant critical eye and always thinking about your content, that's when you know someone's really bought into what they're doing. Is if they're and maybe it's something you kind of just have to shake them awake a little bit of like, hey, we can edit stuff out if you feel like it's boring, so just call that out to me, or maybe I bring it up to you.
And just as
JAG,
sorry, Just a final point on that. I memean, maybe the solution is actually to quickly clue the listener into the fact that in a couple minutes we're going to get on the phone with Frank Zappa. Good guess, right? But before we do that, I just want. Oh, he died, right? All right, so bad example. But with whomever, and
in 2013,
then okay.
You know, I actually know. I know of a music.
Zappa?
I know of a music podcast I can recommend to you, David. So
you heard it. She brought up my music podcast first. Past tense.
I get the
top
points.
10. TimeMachinePod.com. So, but all I'm saying is one of the, as sort of a and related point, one of the crimes I think we commit is we assume the listener is just with us. We assume if we go off on this parentheses, the listener will be with us. You got to remember there are going to be new listeners too. So I always try to think of what's the new listener thinking right now. It's like, oh, you know, Mike, are you going to talk about your dog again? And it's like, that's a running joke on the pod. Okay, the new listener doesn't know about the dog. So I'm a fan of that. I'm a fan of for new listeners. We're going to get to our guest in about 2.5 minutes, but first I need to ask Mike about his dog. And maybe that gives you permission to do a little bit more of that. Just a thought.
And Jag, you have a comment.
2 comments. One, Dave, have you ever thought about coaching those hosts? It's a bit of a flying without a net scary thing. Have like your first question mapped out and don't let them have any other mapped out questions in front of them. And it'll almost force them to like listen to what they're saying, ask follow-up questions. The most famous example of what you're talking about, Dave, I check me on her name. Is it Terry Gross from National Public Radio?
NPR?
Fresh Air, yeah.
Yep, Fresh Air. When Podcast Movement was in Philadelphia, where she got up and gave one of the keynotes, she talked about interviewing Hillary Clinton when she was running for president. And her mind started wandering, the autopilot that Dave just mentioned. And she was thinking about what she had to pick up for groceries on her way home. And Hillary Clinton said something that was extremely newsworthy in the campaign. I don't remember the details. And luckily, there was enough of Terry's subconscious, by her own admission, that picked up on what Hillary Clinton said. And she was able to go back and say, I'm sorry, could you go back to what you just said about X? And it ended up being a big story. So it's really important to not be thinking about, okay, well, who's my next call on Zoom and what am I making? We've all done it as interviewers, but it is crucial to, be in the moment because you could miss a piece of real gold.
Yeah, it's amazing what you could miss. Things that people say under their breath or they think they're not important points. It's your job to stay on that. And as producers, sometimes if you work it out with the host, maybe a sort of another solution to this is if you're a producer on the show, work it out with the host and the guest that as producer, you might jump in, because I've done that in the past. I've jumped in and because someone will say, they'll mention like, well, I also have a podcast, and then they keep talking and then going, and I'll jump in and go, you didn't tell us what the name of the podcast was.
Do you leave that in or is that off air, Dave?
It depends. If the host is kind of, if it's super conversational and like, oh, here comes producer Dave again. But sometimes I'll edit it out and just have him do it over again.
I have a client that's fairly new to podcasting, and generally when I'm an off-air producer, I'll turn my mic and camera off during the conversation. And I've actually, I think, traumatized the hosts a little bit because when they see my square light up and they see my face pop up, it's like, oh shoot, Jag's got something to say.
Jag has something to say.
He did something wrong. We've got to go back and say something again. So I feel bad because I'm like this, scary monster that pops up from under the bed.
And it doesn't help if you write something in the chat, because you write something in the chat and the host, their eyes go right to the chat, and now you've distracted them even further.
Or they don't even see the chat.
Part of it too is host preparation as well. I've had conversations with a few of the hosts that I've worked with over the years where I'll say after the fact, I'm like, hey, they go, how do you think that went? And I go, honestly, I think it was pretty low energy. I don't think you came prepared to this, and kind of having that wake up call. And I've actually said that. I'm like, I don't think you, like, some people will be like, sorry, I was out last night. Kids were up late, things like that. And so maybe it's a lot of it is the host preparation as well for them to be really locked in. Coffee, soda, something to keep them moving, like just keeping them engaged, because you want to like emphasize to them like, hey, this is going to be out there forever. You're only getting one shot with this person that you're talking to, unless it's a good friend they can come back and do it again or something like that. But you as the host need to be as prepared as the guests coming in, going like they're treating this almost like a job, even though it's still super fun, but it's we got enough sleep last night. I ate breakfast. I feel prepared for this. Treating it very seriously. And we laugh and smile, but it's true. Like if you like with exercise, if you don't eat before you exercise, you're not going to be able to lift that weight or anything like that. Like you have to have your routine, you have to be prepared, and you have to be dialed in, because this is something you're spending significant time and resources and money on.
Something I've also found as a producer, Johnny, is that I apologize, Catherine. Is that you have to find out how open your hosts are to feedback. I have had clients who don't want my feedback, and okay, that's fine. I'm paying you to edit this thing down and put it up online. That's fine. I have a client who, describes herself as neurodivergent, and it does not do well with criticism. And she said, if you have constructive criticism for me, I'm happy to hear it, but please put in big, bold caps in your email, constructive criticism follows, so I know to look at it when I'm in the right frame of mind for it. So it's really important to understand that about your clients, or anybody you work with in any sense, because my background in radio is to say, hey, do this differently, do this differently, do this differently, as a former program director of a radio station. But I have to remember and remind myself that not everybody is as open or is sometimes very sensitive to constructive criticism, and you have to tailor it for each person to work with.
And to reiterate, I'm not just like, as soon as they hit stop, I go, you sucked on that.
No, we're not saying that, Johnny.
I wait for them to come say, hey, Johnny, what did you think? I'm not just offering that up.
Exactly.
Because obviously, like you said, people can be sensitive, and I don't want to just like destroy them right out of the gate.
Yeah, I like the Bill Parcells approach to it, and that's 50% preparation, 50% execution. So if you can just tell your client or anybody just to think that way before any performance, that it's 50% preparation and then 50% execution, they'll think more about the preparation process and whatever that is. Because I think when we talk about prep, and I know Jag from radio, we did this. If we had to talk about show prep with talent, everyone's like, oh my God, I got homework to do.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody feels like prep is homework, and it's just, preparation is really just thinking about the big interview you have and just sort of getting into a mind space about it. You don't have to, it's nice that you come in with your questions.
Practice. We're talking about practice.
Practice. We're talking about, yeah. Anyway, that's enough for the sports analogies. For the next 5 minutes.
Yeah. Until the next time it just naturally flows into our conversation. Jag, I'm interested in, let's turn to you for your podcast, Spring Cleaning. What's going out?
It kills me to say this because I love writing, but I am no longer writing show notes from scratch. There are a lot of AI tools out there, and I want to be clear about this. I am not having ChatGPT, Headliner, Descript, all these tools that are available to write show notes. I am not having them write the show notes and I click it and set it and forget it. I'm having them write show notes and summarize the episode. And I am primarily ChatGPT because it's learning my voice and the way I write. I am going through and combing through and editing and tweaking and changing things and just making small tweaks, but keeping the bulk of what it does. I know that may fly in the face of what some people consider, AI versus not. I think I can use the tool, and my general with all things AI, this includes any AI audio processing I use as well, run it through the AI. But anything you use AI for, a human has to check, because there are going to be tweaks and there are going to be little modifications that can take it from, an 85 to a 98 or whatever the numbers are. So I'm using more AI tools, but always with a human guardrail in place.
Absolutely. And I know that we, as a podcast producers group, we've all been sort of monitoring how good some of these tools are for the AI, and it's been impressive, to say the least.
It has.
And we've talked about it before. It's exactly what you said, Jack. That's like the highlight of this entire episode, I would think, is that the AI is here. You should be using it, but you're using it to build your base, and you are doing all of the monitoring and checking it every single time, because it will get stuff wrong. It's not perfect, and it will look like it was written by a robot if you don't have that human looking over it, looking over the edits, looking over the writing, the copywriting that it does, because it is not perfect yet. And it's just, you're using it as this base that you build the final product on top of.
Like a stepping off point. It's a great stepping off point.
So Jag, for anybody who hasn't used an AI tool as of yet, and they're thinking, oh, how does he do that? How do you do that?
Well, I'll use ChatGPT as an example because I like that the best so far for show notes. And there are services that offer podcast specific show notes where you upload your audio file and it will do it for you. With ChatGPT, I'll get a transcript of the episode, either a human transcriber or just script or headliner or one of those tools that will transcribe an episode. And I have created a GPT, which I YouTubed how to do. I didn't really build it from scratch. I just kind of copy pasted from a YouTube video that I watched. It taught it how to write a podcast summary in my voice because I have the paid $20 a month account for ChatGPT, and it's learning how I write. So I have the GPT. I open it up. I say activate podcast summary. I paste in the transcript, and it will. And I have it instructions to give me a short summary, give me 300 or so word show notes, give me a list of keywords. And then give me suggested titles for the episode. It's a massive time saver. It's a lot faster and better use of my time for me to proof what's already there than to come up with it on my own. And what's fascinating to me is occasionally a host will have a guest that rambles and doesn't really tell a story in a straight line. And it can be very difficult to edit audio-wise. It can also be very difficult to summarize. Oh, they went over here and they did this. The AI is pretty good at distilling down the crux of what they're saying a lot better than I am sometimes. Okay, here's what they're talking about. Okay, good, because this person was all over the place, and I edited it to be congruent as best as I could. But there are some cases where you just have a guest that's squirrel, and they get distracted. So.
And another quick hack for ChatGPT, Jag, is as it's learning your voice, it's not so much for you, it's just for the listener. Mm-hmm. If you're using the free version or it's not totally caught up with how you write, it'll learn it as you go. It's putting in the reps and putting in the prompts, but you can just do a really quick, hey, rewrite this in a 7th grade reading level. Yeah. Rewrite this in a 10th grade reading level, because I've done it with the show notes where it spits it out and it thinks that I'm Elon Musk or some kind of rocket scientist, where it's like, it's using these really big fancy words and it sounds way too over professional. I'm like, okay, we need to dumb this down for people. 3rd grade reading level. Boom. That sounds like how a normal person would talk. Copy, edit.
A perfect example of that, Johnny, is I tend to write in the present tense when I write my show notes. And I say, on our show today, Johnny talks about his experience with X. It was writing it in the past tense. So I said, please rewrite these show notes in the present tense. And it did, except it changed every verb to the present tense. And so I had to go through and I had to proof it. So, for example, it said, Johnny sleeps last night and talks about this dream that he has, So it was that's why you really need a human to prove everything, because the last thing you want is to not check something AI does. An audience member sees that AI did it and says, oh, this person's not even putting in the time to do their podcast right.
And David showed us on our offline meeting as well that you can do, the script has a specific tool for this called podcast show notes, and it will use the AI once it transcribes the audio for you. So if you're already using Descript, David, you can explain it better than me, but if you're already using Descript, you can keep that all self-contained where you're just uploading the audio file there. It'll transcribe it, and then you can get your show notes from there.
Yeah, I wonder if I can share my screen. I'll try. Stand by one moment. Okay, let's see if this works. It's loading. Matt, do you have to do so? Oh,
all right. Here's how easy it is to do show notes with Descript. We got a script in here. I'm going to go down to Ask AI. Then I'm going to find show notes. Click on that. It'll put the prompt in the window up there, and you just hit return, say yes to that. Now it thinks for a while.
David and I are putting all 5 of us out of business as we speak.
That have kind of exactly what you want, the title and the summary. You copy it to the clipboard. I'm just going to paste it into a Word doc here, and you'll see you've got practically perfect show notes.
So I was like half asleep when I recorded that, I think.
And that took you like 8 seconds. Now imagine how much time you as the listener right now, if you're doing your podcast production yourself, how much time you're spending writing your show notes, finding the time codes, if you're even doing time codes at all, which you should be.
Right.
that just saves you so much time and energy. And if you're not the type, if you're just thinking to yourself, great, the AI can do it, I don't want to proof it. But if you want to take that extra step and proof it, great. But just imagine how much time that's going to save you over doing 300 episodes of your show. It's hours and hours and hours of time and stress.
Yeah. I mean, I made that video purposely very short, but at the end, if you saw the finished product, what Descript generated was a suggested title, a summary, just of the length you would like, and then the big bonus, as you mentioned, Johnny, those, if you ever done time-coded topics, the time codes, they're such a pain to do manually. And yeah, occasionally the words will be off where you're like, oh, I don't want that in the list of topics, just delete it. But man, as you said, Johnny, this has been probably the biggest game changer for me in posting podcasts is knowing that the show notes are not going to be this big chore that I have to worry about after I've already edited the whole thing.
You could also go and fish out your AI clips or your reels or your shorts that Johnny's not doing anymore.
Yeah, you can, by the way, you can, I feel like I've only scratched the surface of, ChatGPT can do this as well, but in Descript, it's already got my transcript in there. You can ask the AI anything. Find 3 meaningful quotes from Dr. Jones in this podcast, find the number of times that she mentioned the Me Too movement or whatever, anything that might be helpful to you, the robot will talk to you.
And if I may sound really old for a second, that 60 Minutes did a piece on NVIDIA, the company, on Sunday night, and they talked a lot about AI in the future. And the obvious question is AI going to replace jobs? And no, because the AI doesn't have the critical thinking skills that a human does. It will free, in a lot of ways, humans up to do higher level, higher thinking jobs by removing some of the remedial work.
You'll be replaced by the person who can use AI.
Yeah.
I was doing sorry, quick 30-second funny story. I was doing a sports podcast the other day. It was about baseball. So I said, ChatGPT, give me 10 offbeat facts about baseball that people might not normally know. The first one it said was Randy Johnson once killed a chicken by throwing a pitch in an exhibition game. And the second one,
no, it was a bird. Have you seen the video?
Yeah, I have.
It was a bird. It definitely wasn't a chicken, which I told ChatGPT, and ChatGPT apologized for getting it wrong. It also said that Bruce Springsteen in 1974 tried out for the Philadelphia Phillies. Simply not true. I don't know where ChatGPT got it.
And you have to, like we said, this thing is not perfect. Like my quick example of that is I use it to make backgrounds for thumbnails, and I'll tell it, make it in the dimensions of a YouTube thumbnail. And I've realized that I can't use the word YouTube in the prompt because what it will spit back is an image with a big YouTube play button on the image.
Yeah.
And I respond and I say, do not include any images of the YouTube play button at all. It'll spit it back to me, another YouTube image, another YouTube play button. It'll go, here's the same image, but without the YouTube play button. I go, you idiot, it's still in there. And it goes, no, it's not.
You said YouTube. Here I am. I propose maybe for our next Podcast Super Friends, why don't we consider doing an episode of how we're using AI with our podcast clients? That might be an interesting, some actual demos of some of the things going
That's
on.
a good idea.
Well, cleaning up the lineup here for this podcast spring cleaning, I have done a big purge. The traditional spring cleaning move, which you get rid of as much as you can. And what I did was I went through and I got rid of a lot of inputs. I was just getting very frustrated with my email inbox being very cluttered, and I unsubscribed to so many things. I stopped following certain accounts on social media. I dropped a lot. I cleared out I can't tell you how refreshing this was. I cleaned out my podcast feed, my own personal podcast that I listen to, back episodes that I was keeping in my lineup that I was sure I was going to get to at some point and just hadn't. And I just did a big clean. I have a couple podcasts that I was subscribed to that they've moved to a paywall only version, and I didn't go with them as they went to that move. So I just unsubscribed and got all that clutter out. This is a little bit related to what Matt was talking about, but man, I got to tell you, it felt great. I was a little surprised at how good it felt, but it also kind of brought a good lesson to me, which was some of these email newsletters that I was unsubscribing from, they aren't bad. They have good information. Just my attention, everybody's attention is a limited resource. And if we just have to, this was just a good lesson for me to just remember, we're asking for people's time and attention, which has a max. And it was a little bit of just a push to remind myself, okay, if we're putting out podcast content for people, it should be really good to where we're speaking, we're giving them what they need. We're giving them that value so that even if somebody chooses to unsubscribe or whatever, we know that we're communicating the best value that we possibly can. So just doing that, even like I said, it wasn't that anybody was doing anything wrong or, that they had bad content. It was just a fact that we all have a limited amount of attention that we can give to things. And I thought that was sort of just a good lesson for us as producers to take in.
To tag on to that, what subscriptions are you paying for? Go through your banks, go through your credit card statement every month. That stuff starts to add up after a while. I was paying for Adobe products, for Canva, for like a video short editing thing. And I was just like, I don't use 2 of these. Clean that out, go to Adobe. I'm paying X and I'm only using Y. Clean it, like lower my bill, all that stuff. That is, I would add that on top of everything that Catherine said. And I did the podcast cleanse thing too. I was subscribed to so many shows that I was just like, I haven't listened to this show in 6 months. Why am I still subscribed to this? Unsubscribe. And it just cleans up your feed. Listen to the stuff you want to listen to. I think that's great, Catherine. And
I also, I really advocate for the social media purge because I would guess that the counterpoint would be like, okay, then I potentially am moving myself further and further into a bubble where I'm only hearing what I want to hear. And I sort of disregard that because I can choose where I put my eyeballs. I don't want to keep having things that are draining my energy away or triggering that outrage clickbait kind of things. I think that there is some wisdom in not giving your eyeballs over to things that are just really not serving you. Any further comments on that?
Well, I got rid of a couple just last week, and I thought, well, I've been subscribed since 2017. I'm not really getting much out of it, but in the end, I sort of thought if they were to ask me, and they do ask you on the way out, why are you unsubscribing? I said, I don't really think I'm a member of your community. And we're in sort of a stage of community building when it comes to, whether you're doing a podcast or whatever it is that we're doing. I said, it's for someone else. It's just not for me.
And God bless the marketers who have the option, like, are we sending you too much email? Because you can stay on our list and maybe get one once a month or whatever. But some of these emails are they're so much. But yeah, and you're right. And Matt, we even know from doing our own podcast that you change over time, and who you talk to, who you're talking to gets refined. And it's okay if you just aren't in the same circles anymore. That's totally fine.
Well, I hope you didn't unsubscribe from mine because I talked about you today.
I know. Well, I can't wait to, we'll get in more into that offline.
All right.
Okay.
Well,
I'm going to put the news. I'll just put the newsletter in the, on the socials.
Oh, please do.
There you go. All right.
I appreciate the good association. Okay. Well, now everybody is swept clean. They are enjoying their new, refreshed minds. Everything is looking so beautiful from their podcast spring cleaning. It's time to bring in something new. Out with the old, in with the new. David, I'm going to go to you first and tell us, what are you bringing in after this wonderful podcast spring cleaning, a fresh wind coming into your podcast world?
I'm going to take a suggestion that you made by way of illustration on a prior edition of Podcast Super Friends. And you gave an example of a podcast that always had fun with the housekeeping portion of the podcasts. And it became like a thing where one host challenged the other, see if she was going to screw up. And by housekeeping, I mean when you tell people where to find the pod, where to subscribe. And we all do it, and we all do it sort of rote. And hopefully we don't take too long in doing it, because we know that you're going to lose a listener if you try to tell them 5 different ways to get in touch with you. But one of my goals is to take a fresh look at how in all of the podcasts, how we do that housekeeping, and can you actually spin something clever out of it and do it a little bit different every time. And you'll have to stay tuned as to exactly how I do that, because I don't know yet, but that's one of my goals.
I love it. Any particular podcast?
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, I love it. I think that's great.
Yeah, no, I mean, there are some that, I mean, I recall this is kind of a wacky example, but on the improv comedy show, Whose Line Is It Anyway? At the end of that show, they would always have the winner read the credits in a style that they chose. So read it as a 18th century carnival barker. Read it as the guy at the supermarket who says clean up on aisle 5. Read it like that guy. So that would have to be for a lighthearted pod, but something like that, so that the listener would actually look forward to it rather than just I know this already. So
you guys are gonna have to start giving me some notes before the show. We've mentioned NPR, 60 Minutes, and Whose Line Is It Anyways? 3 things that I have no concept of. Just like, what the hell are you guys talking about?
What? Oh my gosh! Oh boy!
The generation widening.
Who invited
somebody make a Blue's Clues reference for Johnny?
Oh man!
Where's Steve when you need him?
On that
Steve
note, I want.
College.
Yeah, he went to college, didn't you know?
He did, yeah.
Matt Kundle, please tell us, what are you bringing in?
This camera and the video setup and everything around. So I bought this camera and I'm still learning how to use it. I haven't made too many positive changes to what's in back of me, but I did shave. And I becoming, put on a nice shirt for you. But I didn't need to do that because I used to have just a little FaceTime camera here. So I'm really learning to do, more video. And I'm actually learning from some of the shows that we're doing right here that, there's Descript and there's AI and there's shorts and then there's no shorts and how to do all this stuff. But it's really been a concentration of video for, I think, the last few months. But I'm going to continue on to start to really use Descript and learn it and see how to do a little bit of video. I've done audio for a while, and I have been outsourcing the video, but now I'm actually going to just settle down and do some of it myself to see how it works. So we're going to try something new.
It's always good to learn how to do that.
Yeah.
What camera are you using for the? Okay. And then one quick tag on what you're saying. I think it's smart to bring it in-house, at least to learn how to do it. This is something that for the listeners who are hosts that are considering finding a producer, one of the things that should be sort of boilerplate for your producers is they need to be technically capable themselves. There are a lot of companies out there that all they do is, I'm your producer. And what they do is they outsource your audio and your video overseas. They have no technical ability. They've never edited anything themselves. They don't know how to use Premiere or Final Cut Pro or Logic or what's the audio one for Adobe, Jag?
Audition.
Premiere. Yeah, Audition. Yeah.
Audition.
If they don't have any technical ability, they don't know what good editing looks or sounds like. And so being able to do it yourself and then sell yourself as a producer is critical. So for those that are people that are kind of marketing or like looking for a producer, that put that on your checklist of things that you're looking for. Can you actually do these things yourself? Do you know what that good editing looks and sounds like?
And I would like to thank Jag. Jag started this, and I'm like, well, if Jag can do it, well, I can do it better.
What, video?
Yeah, Descript.
Yeah.
And just a little friendly competition amongst
you and
the
David
podcast
can't be the only ones who talk
friends.
about Descript all the
We
time.
push each other.
And
I
Descript,
actually-
if you're
Descript,
listening, we're open for
I know,
sponsorships. If you want us to keep
really.
gassing up your company, let's start cutting some
I think
checks.
we all need to give us all a free subscription to Descript and we'll be good to go.
Jag, things are all cleaned up. What are you bringing in?
So I'm going to stay on the AI tip, and I'm started playing with some podcast artwork and some. And when I'm doing videos for clients, accentuating points with videos, there is a real push, as we've talked about in previous episodes, to not use copyrighted material. If you use a material that another photographer took or videographer shot, you could be slapped with, at best, a cease and desist, at worst, an expensive lawsuit. So because of the way my twisted brain works, since our Randy Johnson comment a moment ago, I've been in my brain picturing Randy Johnson actually hitting a chicken with that pitch instead of a bird. And so in the last few minutes, I've been playing with Dolly, which is inside ChatGPT. This won't be gruesome, it's a sort of cartoonified. But if you're curious how ChatGPT interpreted hitting a chicken with a pitched baseball, this is what we got for those of you watching on video.
Oh gosh.
I can't wait. That poor
Can you
chicken.
see it yet or no?
Not yet. Here we go. Yep. the chicken.
That's pretty good, actually.
Of course, it's not bad, but the chicken has a baseball glove like he's playing also.
And
And that's the problem.
Like
Is if I spent more time refining it, it wouldn't let me actually generate of an actual hitting an actual chicken because it claimed that'd be too violent. But the chicken should probably turn around. Then also there's a baseball in the air and the pitcher is holding a second baseball. It also has issues with words and lettering, so that they don't always come out well. But a good example of this was I did a podcast episode of my show, the JAG Show. I'm going to play David and plug my own show here. Is about the Billy Joel fiasco when CBS cut off the end of the Billy Joel concert a couple weeks ago, and I wasn't going to use CBS's footage and get sued by them, so I created an image of a network executive losing his mind with a facsimile of Madison Square Garden in the background. So
nice. Smart.
So that was the artwork for my show. So, there are lots of applications for playing with image generation tools, and there are many of them. There's ChatGPT, obviously, with DALL-E. There's Microsoft Copilot. There's many of them. We actually, on our offline call, David showed us some stuff in Descript that was able to come up with as well. So there are a lot of tools to do that. If you don't have the rights to certain images, sometimes better safe than sorry. And if you create a cartoon, it might be more eye-popping, like Mr. Chicken Baseball.
Yeah,
David, I can't believe you think a chicken can't play baseball. That's my big takeaway here.
I saw Chicken Little. Doesn't he hit a home run in that movie, Chicken Little? Anyway, I needed an image.
By the way, you know what a chicken's favorite baseball stat is, right?
Oh gosh.
Go.
A balk.
Thanks for tuning in to the show, guys.
I'll look for the
Good night, everybody.
Yes.
It was good while it lasted.
No,
Did you get it?
But just to amplify your point, I needed an image of, for reasons I won't go into, a confused Elton John. It was a thing about misheard lyrics, and so ChatGPT, to its credit, said I can't make an image of the actual guy Elton John, but he usually fits this description. So so it created an image, and it really did look like Elton John. So, but ChatGPT is wary of the copyright, so it doesn't want to say it's actually Elton John. And I used the image; it worked. So let your imagination run wild with that. It's really cool.
All right, bringing it on home, Johnny. We've cleaned up. What are you bringing in?
So I'm going to contradict myself. I know I just told you guys you all need to be technically capable of things, but what's in is if you're going to outsource something, and I think that you should be outsourcing this. We've spent the last few months, especially me, being like, get on YouTube, get on YouTube, get on YouTube. It doesn't have to be video. It can be audio only. But what matters is your thumbnail. And the thumbnail creation industry is something so massive that we can't even comprehend it. If you go on Fiverr, if you go on Upwork, any of these global marketplaces, the talent that is out there for these digital artists that can create really eye-catching thumbnails is insane. These people are 20 times more talented than any of us could ever hope to be combined. Outsource that. Pay $5, $10, $15, $20 an episode to get a really eye-catching, eye-popping thumbnail for your YouTube version of your podcast. That is what is in for me, is get really great thumbnails for your show. Because what matters, it doesn't matter how great your content is on YouTube. It doesn't matter how amazing the guest is. That thumbnail has to be something that is going to stop someone from scrolling and go, ooh, that looks interesting. What is that? And then click on it.
Clickability is so important, and I don't think that early podcasting really talked about that as much as they probably could have, but it really is that economy is very strong, and it's something we all need to be paying attention to. That is my comment.
As voice talent, I'm trained to just not recommend Fiverr for anything. But and I've also found that in the, a couple of years ago, when you would ask for artwork, generally show artwork on Fiverr, they'd always put a microphone in it. And if you want to know why so many podcasts have microphones in it, I blame Fiverr, because I think the people who are designing these things, this is what they think about what a podcast is. Oh, here's a microphone, and that's what it is. But yeah, find somebody good if you're going to find somebody to do this. Upwork is available too.
You're sifting through a lot of garbage to get to the gold, but once you find that gold, you can find someone that is really responsive, is really talented, and will work with you to find the exact look that you're going for. And the people that I've found and I work with consistently are just absolutely fantastic, and they make incredible thumbnails and it saves me so much time and energy of trying to learn this stuff and be able to do it myself.
It's a specific skill. I think that's a
it's not audio, it's not video, it's graphic design. And that's not what podcasters or podcast producers necessarily do. I can do Photoshop, I can do Illustrator, I can do After Effects, but I mean not on the level that we're talking about here.
Well, in just a minute, I know we're coming up on time. We're going to try and squeeze in just a lightning round talking about summer. But before that, I'll just say my thing that I'm bringing in is I've been really spending a lot of time focusing on SEO, specifically for podcasts. Another thing that I think that maybe we don't talk about as much as we could as podcasters. I've been using some tools that help with headlines specifically for podcasts, trying to make them a little bit more punchy and answering questions that people are already looking for. If we've done all the things that we're supposed to, like we have the show notes, we're putting our podcast, we have a website for our podcast, using that SEO specifically for the podcast is something I've been really focusing on, and I'm hopefully seeing some fruit from it, but it's just something that I think just having even the mindset of we need to be delivering a product that an audience is looking for, that just has sort of a trickle down effect where we start to maybe just the way that we put together our materials that go around the show are maybe trying to connect with that audience a little bit easier. So my thing that I'm bringing in is SEO specifically for podcasts. Okay. Spring leads into summer. Summer slumps, is that a myth or a fact? What are we going to be doing this summer? We're going to just do just because of our time, let's just do it as a lightning round. Jag, I'm going to start with you. What is your summer word of wisdom?
My summer word of wisdom is from my own failure as a podcaster. My JAG show fell off for about 6 months. My summer word of wisdom is I'm recommitted to putting out an episode every week, even if it's 5 minutes. And that will include, if I'm traveling over the summer, to have something ready to rock and roll. I've done doing video podcasts. I was on vacation a couple weeks ago. I did it as just audio that week. I still got the content out everywhere each week.
That's great. Good consistency. And that builds that muscle of like resilience and not giving up to with anything. David?
I'll do something similar to Jag. I'm going to revive my show, The Boston Podcast, which has always existed, but I've been lazy about consistency, and consistency is king. And so it's a shame. I'm not going to let it. I've got like hundreds of episodes in there. It will get revived. It will get rejiggered, revamped, revived. That's it.
Tanned, rested, ready. That sounds amazing. Perfect for the summertime. Johnny?
Summer is big for travel. You as the host are probably going to be traveling a lot. Don't let your podcast die. Either batch record, do 2 episodes recorded in a week, do 4 episodes recorded in a week, or make the small investment of $55 and pick up the Fifine USB microphone for $55 on Amazon. We just started shipping it to some of our guests. It sounds incredible. It sounds just as good as this microphone. I'm not kidding. It's better than the Q2U. It's better than the other microphones that we've recommended. It plugs right into your computer. Pick it up for $55. It's got a built-in stand into it. It can set right on your desk, bring it up close to your face. Use it while you're traveling. That's all you need. You need that microphone. You need some headphones. And you need either Riverside or just record with QuickTime directly into your computer.
Wow. Good. Another good product boost. That sounds that a good investigation. Plus, how fun would it be to be like remote, you're just dialing in from wherever your cabin in the woods for your vacation, whatever you're doing the beach. Yes. All those things. Sounds really great. And Johnny always coming in with the great product recommendations. Matt, summer. Wait a minute. First of all, do you even get a summer?
Yes. We get 2 weeks. In Winnipeg, you get 2 weeks. So the flood ends, and then the mosquitoes end, and then you get 2 weeks, and then it's winter. That's what happens. So this summer thing about the drop-off, it's a myth. And I've got 2 pieces of proof. One of them is Mark Asquith from Captivate had a podcast, and he let it just sit there for a year. He came right back and had the same amount of people still there when he released an episode. Another example is Cynthia and Josie's Unmentionables. They took the summer off, but what they did was they remained totally active on social media. So the episodes might have stopped, but they were still active on social media, talking about what was coming up. They were posting stuff every day. They had not stopped that section of it, and they didn't lose any listenership along the way. If you are going to take a break, my recommendation is to put in the description when you're going to be back. Also leave a bonus episode in there saying, hey, I'm off for the summer. You might want to try some of these older episodes, but we're going to be back on August 29th with a brand new episode, and stick with that date. Set the appointment in advance. And then if you are coming back, maybe you want to have a trailer for your, some of the episodes that you've got coming up in the fall. And again, this is something, if you can't do the batch recording that Johnny suggested, which is always a good thing, but there are things you can do, and stay active on social media. So many people take a holiday, and they really take a holiday. They're like, they do nothing, and everything goes away, and they can't figure out why. So things to think about if you're heading into summer.
I like it. And I will say that for my summer, this past year, there was a lot of client reflection in December. We did a lot of, how was this year in review? How did things go? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to spend some of the summertime really using the summer to do some planning for the fall. I'm really going to try and capitalize on September being the second new year that marketers talk a lot about. That a lot of people are they're gearing their things. People, whether it's back in school, they're done with all their vacations. There is sort of a bump that comes in September. And I really want to plan for that, as opposed to waiting till the end of the year to look back to how things are going. So my summer is going to be one of planning in the podcast world.
I might suggest, Catherine, that it's the first new year, because Christmas is just, there's Christmas in between the new year, and then it takes forever to get people going. But bang, everybody after Labor Day is ready to roll.
They're ready. They're just going to finish that year strong. They had a great summer. We're back in action, baby. That sounds good. Well, I think this has been a great podcast, Super Friends.
Did we do David's?
Yeah.
Oh, David, I'm so sorry. What summer?
No, we did mine.
Boston.
Yeah, I said I'm going to revamp my show, and my it's my
podcast
partner.
You forgot it because he was going to take my advice about the turning even housekeeping into something fun.
See, Johnny,
That's
if you
right.
watched
We'll do
60 Minutes, you'd have a longer attention span. You wouldn't have missed that.
But David sounds exactly like Hillary Clinton. I just totally dozed off. I wasn't paying attention.
Oh boy. Wow. Okay, this show has taken a turn that I was not expecting, but this has been a great one. Let's go around, and starting with Matt, and we'll be signing off as the Podcast Super Friends. Matt Kundle, take it away.
Matt Kundle, Winnipeg, Manitoba, the Sound Off Podcast, episode 400 with
congrats.
Dave Jackson from the School of Podcast, comes out on Tuesday.
Okay, big get. David, not forgetting David.
Pod617.com, Boston Podcast Network. Thank you, Catherine. Great job today.
Jag.
John Gay, JAG In Detroit Podcasts, JagInDetroit.com, and JAG In Detroit on all social media.
And the Young Johnny Podcasts.
I'm going to use my plug to apologize to David and go check out pod617.com.
Thanks.
And if anybody could recommend a music podcast to me, I'd be most grateful. But this has been Catherine O'Brien in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, Branch Out Programs. Hello, Catherine O on social medias. Thanks for joining us, everybody, with the Podcast Super Friends. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Podcast Super Friends. For a transcript of the show, or to connect with the Super Friends, go to the show notes of this episode or go to soundoff.network.